On this week's episode of Australian Survivor, Talking Tribal, we unpack all the eliminations so far.
See, I have no issue with divide and conquer, but she just divided and did nothing else.
Discuss the hidden immunity idols that were found and work through the pick of the rewards this week. And we're also going to do a bit of a deep dive into wardrobe, yes, as we explore the best choice of clothing to wear in the game of Survivor.
I don't know why Geordie was surprised that his overalls didn't fully survive the slide.
And later, Hayley catches up with this week's eliminated contestants. Welcome everyone to this, the very first week of Australian Survivor Blood versus Water. What a massive week. Today, we're going to be talking about the first 3 episodes. So if you haven't seen them yet, there'll be massive spoilers. So jump off and make sure you watch them right now. Let's get straight into it, though. There's so much to talk about. Hayley, let's start with you. Who is your standout player of the week?
Hey, James, it has been an awesome week of Australian Survivor, and I have really gravitated towards Nina. She's giving me everything I want from being Sandra's protege. She's got great social bonds. She's really making her way into the tribe, and she's making these subtle moves. She wanted Andy out, but she didn't throw out his name. She said to Mark, "Who do you want out?" And he said Andy. So that is a really smart way to make your moves happen without getting a target on your back. So the calm approach has really made me Princess Nina, Team Nina at the start of this game.
For me, I have to agree with Hayley. It's hard to go past Nina. I definitely agree with her deferring the credit and not being able to trace the big move back to her. I also completely agree with the move in terms of it not becoming a strength-based pathway that might not work out for her. And it's honestly just a little bit disrespectful as the daughter of Sandra. And in terms of deferring credit, you really have to look at her language, saying things like, "I'm not against it," or "I'm leaning that way." It was a really soft way to approach the game and to speak. And I think that not coming in really hard allowed her to make a big move in a really soft way. So there's definite attention to detail there. So I'm fascinated by Princess Nina. She's incredible. And her partnership with Mark, who I think has also been amazing in making connections and hanging back. I wonder if there's a bit of a military connection because Nina's dad is career military, maybe a bit of a father figure role there from Mark. So they as a duo are really impressing me right now.
I've been most impressed with Sam Gash on the Blood Tribe. She started the week like a little mouse. She's learnt the lessons of what went wrong in season 2 in Samoa. She's built relationships. And at that tribal council, she asserted complete control. When she sensed threat from Dave, she got up and she eliminated it as quickly as possible. But she had a plan A, she had a plan B in Katie, who went home, and she even had a plan C with that 1 vote in Sandra. Sam Gash is my man of the match from week 1.
What was your favourite moment from the week, Shannon? What stood out moment-wise?
I think that there's a couple to me, and they both have to do with Sandra. I mean, Sandra coming off the helicopter, I had actual goosebumps on my arm, and there was a lot of lines thrown in from Sandra's time on the show that I thought were really fun and hark back, maybe even accidentally, to the history. But as someone who loves the culture of Survivor, that was just epic for me. And then also Sandra just making it through. My heart was racing. I was willing to defect from Australia if they got rid of her in the first tribal council, but she made it through, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Hayley, was there anything you loved in particular? Anything that just jumped out at you and thought, wow, we are in for a game here?
Yeah, for me, it is tribal council, just like being back in that space where everyone is so tense and you don't know what's going to happen, especially when we saw David throw out Sam's name and then she got up and she was running around and trying to redirect the vote. That was so exciting. And knowing as well that he had an idol, didn't know if he was going to play it, really added to the tension. So just to be back into Australian Survivor and back in tribal council has got me really excited for this season.
Now, we saw this time around the whole environment, the location that this is being shot, the location is quite different to the one that you guys were in, Hayley and George. What were your first reactions and how do you think those differences are going to play out?
Well, the first thing that I noticed was there was a lot more running water at this location in Queensland. Cloncurry was really dusty. It really got literally stuck in your skin. But the conditions are harsh. It's more tropical. It's hotter. It's more exhausting. And when people are tired, they make mistakes. What's going to separate the good survivor players from the bad ones is who can cope with the conditions, but also cope with the pressure of the game and make the moves that count at the right time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with George. It looks so hot out there where they're staying. Like it was hot for us, but this just looks like a totally another level. I imagine they're all running around trying not to get sunburnt and to find shade. We also see that it's really rocky, which doesn't help when you're trying to find somewhere to sleep. And the running water can be really helpful. We have this stagnant pool of water, so they can probably feel like they're getting clean in that water and try to catch some fish.
Speaking of the heat, some of the outfits that were worn maybe weren't the most appropriate for hot conditions like that. We saw a few pairs of jeans in there in particular during the water challenge. What were your thoughts on that? And what's the best outfit to wear? I mean, it seems such a trivial thing, but at the same time, does it make an impact, George, on what you're wearing or what the contestants are wearing?
I think I took the worst wardrobe in Australian Survivor history, a Hawaiian dog shirt and just several button-up shirts that were wafer thin. But look, denim, will it dry quickly? No, but it probably keeps you warm on those really cold nights.
I think this week, Chrissy has taught us that Survivor is all about outlast, outfit, and outside. So some of these people have got the outfit part right, and others, time will tell. You can tell the returnee players have done this before. They've sat around for years thinking about what they could have worn differently. Sam Gash has done an excellent job of putting together an outfit that layers a sarong around her neck as a scarf. I'm jealous. That was a great idea. Her wrists are full of scrunchies. Her hair's got a clip in it. All that stuff is really important because once you're out of hair ties, you're in a lot of trouble. Although I did love that we saw Geordie wearing those overalls and nothing else. Like, what? I wouldn't really think denim was a fabulous idea normally, especially not in Fiji where it rains a lot and you need things to dry. But in Australia, it is hot in the day and it does dry if it rains. So
Plus, if it's cold and you're like huddled up next to the fire to keep warm, those embers sometimes fall on you, and denim's a little bit fire retardant. So maybe Geordie is thinking a little bit cleverly, although, it's already broken.
I don't know why Geordie was surprised that his overalls didn't fully survive the slide. I was like, that looks extremely painful. Like, you should not be wearing that on the slide. But I think it's really interesting with outfit from a TV perspective, how there's like a pantheon of iconic outfit items, and you could just give an item of clothing and know the player that's connected to. Like, tie-dye shirt has always been Rupert, for example. Boston Rob's little bee hat, Russell's hat that Sandra famously burned. And I do think that for someone like Andy, even for just being in the show for just one episode this season, bringing back the visor, Andy and visor are two words that are synonymous now. So just as a brand building exercise, I think it really made the mark. And I think Andy's visor will be probably the clothing item that I remember most from this whole season, despite just being in the one episode. So I think that was a really good outfit choice.
Look, I'm just glad we didn't get a wardrobe malfunction with Khan on that reward challenge.
Yeah, that could have been awkward. Let's talk about rewards. How important are they, and how important are the ones that have already won? I want to talk specifically, though, about how you use a reward. We saw the Blue Tribe decided to split theirs.
I'm really glad that the contestants are clued on this year, that there's always an advantage in a reward. And what we saw is that was the final nail in Brianna's coffin. She went out, got that tackle box, and was looking for an advantage or an idol that wasn't there that time. But look, at the end of the day, the rewards, they're good. They can help you. The comfort items are great, particularly to get an extra hour or so sleep at night. But you've got to focus on the game. And what impressed me was Khan. When Khan was with David at the Survivor handy store, he wanted to trade information for a reward. Khan knew what's important in the game of Survivor: information, not beef jerky.
Yeah, it's not always about the jerky or the actual comfort item, but throughout your series, Hayley, were there times when you had a choice to utilize a reward or bring someone closer, or had to weigh up whether excluding someone from a reward would come back to bite you?
Yeah, the choices about who you take on a reward can be really strategic. So in my season, we saw that Joey was taken as a single person on a reward, and that actually elevated his threat level because it made us all think that they saw him as a leader or someone who would leak information. So that's not necessarily a good thing. Later in the game, when you see smaller groups of people being taken on a reward, sometimes that can make it very clear where alliances are and make those groups of people into threats. So you have to really think carefully because it's the perception in this game that matters, and perception is reality in Survivor.
Yeah, even the smallest things can become very, very big very quickly. We're going to take a little break now, but still to come on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal. The panel are going to share their thoughts on superfan Andy's approach this week, and they're also going to reveal just who they would have voted out this week. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal. We need to talk about Andy.
I'm Andy. I'm 49 from Coolum Beach in Queensland. I'm an advertising consultant and I'm playing Survivor for the second time. And hopefully playing a little bit better than I did last time.
George, what are your thoughts on Andy? I mean, he thinks he had a little bit of a plan there.
God, it was tough watching Andy in that first episode. I mean, as a returning player, he really should have known better. And he said he wanted to have a strategy and he was like Mike Tyson. His strategy was more like a Lada, the old Soviet car. You can go from A to B, but the car crash is inevitable. I mean, Andy went out there and he barked instructions. You have Mark Wales, a literal war hero, one of the biggest men in Australia, lying down next to the girls and listening and being told what to do by Andy as he's just painting a target on his back. And when you're out there on night 1 and night 2, you're looking for any excuse to vote someone off.
Yeah, I think Andy went in definitely wanting to play a different game and thinking that he wouldn't really exert his will as much and listen more to people. And he chose something that could make sense communally to the group to keep the tribe strong. There's a lot of merit to that idea in Australian Survivor that is extremely strength-based with the challenges. But the thing is, not everyone is always going to want to keep the tribe strong because they might not consider themselves as strong. They might see themselves as on the chopping block if that were to be the strategy of the tribe. So a lot of people are going to want to flip that around. And I also think Alex's likability must be off the charts. People were falling over themselves to save him from going home from this injury. So Andy was saying things at Tribal about how people know that there's a vote to be made, but that really isn't how anyone felt. So while I think his intentions were good, unfortunately, he still wasn't reading the room to see that that individually, even if it might make sense for a tribe, wasn't making sense for a lot of the players on the tribe, and they pushed back against him.
Yeah, look, I have to agree with George and Shannon here. Andy has played before, so he has this amazing insight into what went wrong last time. He was a good strategic player last time. He was excellent at the challenges, but he knows what let him down was the social game. And that's the thing he had to walk into this game trying to nail from the start. Last time he left the game, he kind of threw out a grenade that made people think he wasn't very trustworthy. So top of his list should have been, get everyone to think that I'm trustworthy. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed at that. We saw a few Survivor 101 fails here, which was don't make yourself the leader at the start and don't throw out people's names at the start. And so, yeah, we've seen Andy go so early and perhaps not been able to rectify those mistakes in this game from last time.
Hayley, you talked about trust there. Do you think the way that he left the game in season 4 made him a bit of a target in the sense that people felt he was untrustworthy from the get-go?
Yeah, I think that you have to assume that people are coming into Australian Survivor having done their research. And Andy has played before, which is a real positive for him because he can learn from a few things, but it can be a detriment if people have learned about your game. And what people may have learned is not to trust Andy. So he had to come in here, fires blazing about trust, become someone everyone trusts. And unfortunately, he didn't manage to do that. And so we've seen him go out.
Now, apart from Andy getting his torch snuffed at that first tribal, another big moment at that tribal council was Brianna taking a bit of a swing at Chrissy, throwing her under the bus. How big a moment was that, and how big of a mistake was it?
Yeah, when Brianna started throwing Chrissy under the bus, I was like, no, don't do it. Like, how is this going to benefit your game at all? You never really want to make an enemy out of someone in Survivor. You definitely don't want to make an enemy out of someone who has an idol and is certainly not going home tonight and will be back at camp tomorrow. So I didn't see how that was a strategic play, how that could help at all. And it kind of felt like a bit of a Survivor faux pas.
See, I have no issue with divide and conquer, but she just divided and did nothing else. What was the benefit of her attacking Chrissy? I mean, Chrissy is someone that would be a potential target if you sat down, kept your lips closed, and then they went down a path of weakness at future tribal councils. She needed to do nothing. She put a target on her back, and it cost her at the very next tribal council.
And now in episode 3, we see the Red Tribe go to trouble for the first time, and there was some serious fireworks there. David's paranoia got the best of him. What were your reactions there, Shannon, when he tried to throw Sam under the bus as some sort of retaliation, I guess?
I did feel a little bit indignant on Sam's behalf because we just watched her politic for him the entire day. And I think as well, it showed Sam's influence. I mean, it really seems by the good of her own will that everyone turned away from the David vote earlier in the day and then turned back on him at Tribal Council. So I think we're really seeing Sam's power here. She came out and she was, in ways, the Sam we know. She's going to be out there. She's going to be dominant. She's like a force to be reckoned with. But I think this time around, it's a lot more positive. And even though I don't love sparring with people at Tribal Council, that may not have really been her fault. And also, she's doing it in really positive ways where he's apologizing to her. He's clearly in the wrong. And everyone is very much on her side. People are saying that they love her and feel very upset for her. So that just shows the strength of her social relationships. And I think she's absolutely the power player on Blood right now.
Sam Gash didn't come to play. She came to slay. And I just felt such pleasure in watching her get up there and turn it around on the piece of a dime because she sensed a threat level. Yeah, she went into back Dave, but she realized she made a mistake earlier on back at camp and she turned it around. You have to get the axe and you have to swing when you take the chance. But she had a backup plan. She put that one vote on Sandra just in case Katie had an idol. And if she did, Sandra would have gotten home. But what will impress me even more is if she blames Dave for voting for Sandra. That would take it to the next level.
Yeah, I think George has a really good point there that Sam's rogue vote on Sandra can totally be explained. She could say, oh, it was Kate, but Kate's gone home and can't defend herself. Or she could pin it on David and then Sandra might gun for David. So that's a really foolproof way for Sam to be able to wreak a little bit of havoc. I can't wait to see what happens.
And you don't want to make Sandra angry, and she will be when she gets back to camp.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, she's played the game several times, so she's already, I'm sure, on that walk back to camp, analysing exactly who's done what in her calculations. Who would you guys have sent home this week? Who do you think you would have picked off if you were there at Tribal?
Look, this early in the game, I'm not really going to go bat for anyone else. I'm still trying to understand where everyone's alliances are. It's so early. So if everyone's got a vote on Andy and that looks like where their vote is going to lie, then I wouldn't have done anything differently. I would have let it go and it would have been Andy going home.
I kind of agree with the move to get rid of Andy, but my natural instinct is to target the under-the-radar players. I don't let people hide under the shadows and then try and excel at the later stage of the game. So if I was on the Water Tribe, I probably would have tried to target someone like Geordie, someone who would sneak through at the early stage of the game without ever having a target on their back because they're physical, they're an asset at challenges, they're generally likable, and then they go on a run. Get rid of that kind of person at the start where you still have the chance. But the issue that you'd have is you've got to have 6 votes to be a majority, and it's not easy to get.
I think Geordie seems really socially well integrated with Mark, and with Nina seem to be in a lot of those primary conversations. So I think that he's saving himself with his own social game and just being a really key member socially of the tribe. But for me, I would have been exactly like Nina, fighting against the mentality of tribe strength, because if that were the mentality, then I would be first boot. So that's what I would go with.
For those people who might be a little bit confused, David played his half idol. What does that mean for Khan?
Yeah, I mean, David played a full idol as we know idols to be. So for Khan, he still has his idol and that he could play at any time. It just means that they can't be combined into a super idol.
You're right. Well, we'll talk about super idols a little bit later on in our World of Survivor with Shannon. That's still to come on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal. Plus, we discuss the hidden immunity idols that were covered this week, how the theme of blood versus water is playing out, and just what impact it might have further down the track, and as well as that Hayley chats with one of our eliminated contestants. All that when we come back on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal. Time now for our segment of World of Survivor with Shannon, where we deep dive into a particular element of Survivor. This week we're talking hidden immunity idols, a really integral part of the gameplay. Shannon, let's talk about idols and also idol clues. This week we saw an idol exposed in a way that made players compete in a way we haven't really seen before.
I think hiding two clues on the same beach to get people to fight over it is really novel, but we have seen people fight in different ways. Multiple people can see a clue, and also there can be verbal clues. Jonathan famously at a challenge last season was like, there's an idol at this challenge, and two people on this very panel were there fighting for that idol, so they can probably speak to what it's like to be battling each other physically for an idol.
Yeah, I can totally relate to Shay there about that feeling of running for an idol and trying to snatch it, the adrenaline, and also knowing you've already outed yourself, kind of exposed yourself by doing that. So I felt bad that Shay didn't get the idol at that point. Although she might not come off as bad as, say, Brianna, who blocked Chrissy when she was trying to get it. I don't think Chrissy would have appreciated that.
Now, a twist on the traditional hidden immunity idol is, of course, the super idol. Shannon, how rare are they and what power does that give you in the game?
So this super idol is, as it's been come to be known in US Modern Survivor, which is that usually with idols, you play them before the votes are read. So you don't know if you had the most votes, you could waste one, for example, as Chrissy did. The super idol, as this is being described, is that you play it after the votes are read. So you know that you've been voted out. There's no way to waste it. And you're just like, nope, I'm staying in the game. So as you'll see with shared idols, shared super idols, and also just shared idols that they've had in like season 38 in the US, that can be really, really difficult. And it is such a fun twist because even if David hadn't played his idol and that was still an option, Khan and David seemed to have like quite a negative relationship. It felt like Khan had some walls up because he just voted out David's daughter, and David seemed to kind of respond with an adversarial reaction to that by not giving any of the rewards and any of the outs for Khan to come back to camp with. So we can have a lot of fun with people playing, trying to play shared idols and screwing each other over because they don't have the same vision for that idol. And we've certainly seen that come to very tragic and shocking exits for some people.
In Ep 2, we see Shay find an immunity idol, but George, it looked like for a moment there maybe someone other than her was going to get the idol.
Yeah, that idol hunt at the water camp was really exciting. I mean, Khan rallied the troops, went over there, and he really deserves the title of King Khan right now. He helped Shay grab it. He could have kept it for himself and burnt every single bridge on that tribe, but he gave it to Shay and he convinced her not to save Brianna. That was a masterclass by Khan that deserves the star sticker that he was for episode 2. But it was an exciting way to find an immunity idol with a giant metal rod.
I do think as well there was a lot of logic to Shay not saving her ally in Brianna. I usually go for ally versus idol. I usually choose ally, as I did, for example, George, when you saved Kara. But I think this early in the game, Brianna was kind of a weight that was dragging Shay down, and she was aware of the fact that she had her own social options. People wanted to work with her. She has Ben on the other side, possibly getting options for her there. And to tie yourself so strongly and use an idol on someone, even with a group that could split on you, it could send you home. Either way, it's definitely going to annoy people who all want to vote out this person that you are individually saving. So I thought Khan did a great job in bringing Shay in, but I think Shay responded to that with logic, voting for Brianna and getting her foot in the door for this alliance rather than clinging to, yes, an ally, but an ally at this point that was becoming a detriment to her game.
Apart from getting her hands on that idol, do you think there was anything that Brianna could have done there to sort of save her skin?
I would never agree about being low key at the start, Haley, although it is a legitimate strategy. I think what Brianna did wrong is she went out all guns blazing, but she never targeted the right people for the right reason. She should have gone up to Chrissy at the start, corralled an alliance of outcasts, and then targeted one of the big players. Target Mark, say he's going to go far in the game. Target Khan, say he's an incredible social player. But why would you target someone that is in the same category of ally as you? I think Brianna dug her own grave and she needed Macedonian Jesus and only him to save her.
Yeah, I have to agree. Besides Brianna running and jumping on that idol, some of the mistakes she'd already made were pretty cemented. So calling out Chrissy at tribal and making an enemy, it's kind of hard to unwind that stuff. So I don't know if there was much at that point she could have done besides trying to get that idol.
So Khan and David had the opportunity for a very special, unique idol. Shannon, how powerful is having something like that in the game?
So the Super Idol is tremendously powerful. It is that get out of jail free card, but I really love it more when it's in this half capacity, because sometimes when you have a shared idol, you get to give it to someone and you make that choice and you have to put that trust in them and they can screw you over. Or sometimes it's just totally random, like in season 32, which this idol is obviously based on. Ty and Scott each found an idol randomly. They connected based on that. And then Scott put all of his trust in Ty to use the Super Idol, and Ty decided not to, which is why Scott went home in the most dramatic moment of that season. So while it is a trinket, it becomes about that connection and that relationship. And David and Khan weren't forced into the situation. David actively chose Khan to be there, probably knowing Khan as a public figure and a likable public figure. But I feel like that relationship just went south so quickly and seems just really, really negative. So I guess it's maybe a lucky thing that that's not an option for them anymore, because even if David still had that idol, I don't know that we would have seen it come to fruition and have these people who are not really on the same page use it for a super idol together.
Guys, let's talk a little bit about the theme, blood versus water. Obviously, we saw it play out in a big way this week with emotions running high. David and Kate found out their loved ones had been eliminated and dealt with it in different ways. But from your perspective, was that the first time that we saw just how powerful this theme can be, Haley?
Absolutely. Having a loved one clearly can be a detriment to your game, depending on how you respond to it. So if you are blinded by revenge because you want to see the person who voted your loved one out go home, then you might make decisions that are not in your best interest strategically and are a bit more fueled by emotion. So I think especially parents will have to be careful, because you see Sandra talking about how upset she'd be if Nina left, and David being upset when Brianna's voted out. And they really want to be careful that they don't let that override their game.
Croc made a really interesting point on this theme. Let's have a look what he had to say.
So whoever we see gone today, I think that's going to change the dynamics of how that person's loved one's going to play as well. Like how they're feeling. Well, they're going to feel different because they know they've got one person less. Because they know if they go to merge or tribe swap, they don't have that extra person that we might have.
Yeah, it's hard to keep a cool head when someone you love has left the competition. George, is that something you think you can harness, or sometimes you think the weight of what's happened might affect your gameplay?
I think you have to play Survivor with as little emotion as possible, because when you get emotional, you make mistakes. So, like Haley said, if all that David is focusing on is getting revenge for Brianna, he's not going to go very far in the game. He needs to repivot, focus on the relationships he needs to survive, and to just play the game. But it's blood versus water. What's going to distinguish the players that go far in this game are the ones that are willing to do what it takes to get the job done.
Yeah, and if you want the ultimate revenge, instead of trying to vote the person out that got rid of your loved one, befriend them, keep them on side, take them to the end, and then win. Because winning is the ultimate revenge, not voting them out.
But it is really difficult, obviously, to put those emotions aside. But I think that what is annoying for David right now is that he doesn't have anyone to connect to who've also lost their loved ones. He needs to be looking out for whoever loses their loved ones on the water tribe next, and then go and make them, you're my new loved one now. You're my new connection now that I've lost my daughter in the game. So that's the strategy for people who start losing their loved ones early.
Yeah, and as Croc said, when you find out your loved one has gone home, you find out just before you're going into a challenge, and they're often really physical. So finding that out can probably put like a big fire in your belly so that you're going to perform super well and full of adrenaline at the challenge. And we see that with David. He finds out that Brianna goes home, and then he's pumped up, and then they end up winning the challenge. So maybe it can be a little bit of an advantage in that way.
We talk a lot about, you can't get emotional, like you just have to be level-headed, you have to make smart decisions. But what's the reality, Haley, out there when you're hungry and you're tired and you, in this scenario, have got all the emotions of playing near someone you really care about? What's the reality of not making emotional decisions?
Look, it would be great to be a survivor robot that doesn't respond, but it's really hard to do that. And the people who tend to do really well in Survivor often are caring, empathetic people who can relate to others and create those social bonds. But the flip side is those kinds of people will be really upset if they lose a loved one. So it's going to take, a really astute, clear-headed player to notice their emotions when they're upset that someone's been voted out, but to keep them in check so that they can keep playing strategically.
Yeah, it's going to play out in a whole heap of fascinating ways over the next few weeks, I'm sure. Stick around, because still to come on Australian Survivor Talking Tribal, we can talk about Chrissy and her knowledge of the game, or lack thereof.
This is ridiculous. What are my Bear Grylls?
King Khan stepping up into a leadership role.
I just put the fire on and make the rice and beans.
Becoming a fan favourite very, very quickly. And also Haley catches up with some of this week's eliminated contestants. Welcome back to Australian Survivor Talking Tribal as we sink our teeth further into this amazing season of Australian Survivor Blood versus Water. We can't go any further without talking about Chrissy. Hard to miss this week. Big character, kind of oblivious to how to play the game, but there's a lot of lovable moments from her this week. George, we spoke, I think, at our very first ep about the fact that in your season you had a few people who didn't really know how to play the game. Is that a pro in some elements because you're not overanalyzing it? How do you think it's going to play out for Chrissy?
I think Chrissy truly is one of a kind. We have never, ever seen a Survivor player like Chrissy before. I know that the boys were saying that, but she truly is a gem. And the more you polish Chrissy, the better she gets. I want to hang out with her. I want to go to her Botox and filler clinic with her in Noosa. And I just want to have some drinks with her. And when you talk about what is valuable in Survivor, it's a character like her. It's someone you want to keep around because she's a delight. She makes you laugh. That's who I'd want to work with. And I'm sure that the other castaways on the Water Tribe are thinking like that as well. I'm so excited by Chrissy. She's just so entertaining.
Yeah, I've got to agree. Chrissy has been so much fun to watch. Normally I would be supporting the people who are fans of the show, but The fact that she's not a fan is so endearing. I'm loving watching her talk about tribunal when she was like, do we really have to vote? It was so funny. So yeah, I think that this could be a strength for Chrissy. At the start of the game, she might not look like a threat at all because she doesn't know how the game works, apparently. So that could work in her favor if it lowers her threat level. And then she just needs to get further, because once you get to merge, if you're not a big physical threat, she might find that she's in quite a good position. So yeah, I'm kind of loving Chrissy right now.
Shannon, we've seen players like this actually get a fair way along in the game because no one sees them as a threat. People think they can sort of drag them along towards the last few votes. I mean, it's actually a pretty powerful position to be in, whether she knows it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it can be tricky earlier on, especially in like an older woman demographic. I think about Tara from Australian Survivor 2017. She made it through the pre-merge due to some twists as well. But I think I could see Chrissy bobbing along for quite a while. And then once she hits merge, I feel like everyone will kind of want to use her lack of knowledge of the game. At that point, she may have come into her own, but then she's pretty much long for the end game, I think. And we often do see that shift. So I think if Chrissy can really socially integrate now and make it through several more votes and not really have to worry as much, hopefully, about the physical side of things, like she definitely, I don't know, I can somehow see Chrissy like at the very end of the game, but I don't know why. I can just see it.
Let's look at what Chrissy did. Her enemy was Brianna. She stuck in the knife and she got her voted out. She might not have done a lot of survivor-specific preparation, but she's getting all the survivor elements of the game right. She's extremely likable, she's fun around camp, and she's getting rid of her targets. She's 2 out of 2.
Someone else who's extremely likable and emerging as a bit of a power player is our new Survivor royalty, King Khan. Very strong, great social game. He's proved to be very observant as well. I mean, he is going to be one to watch for sure. Shannon?
Yeah, I think Khan, I mean, it's been spoken about the things that he's doing right. He has great connections. He's very switched on. He's very, very smart. My only concern for Khan is that he thinks he's being underestimated as just the likable chef, but people are aware of the skills he brings to the point where he is being called king. So while I think he's playing a really, really good game so far and was definitely the architect of the Brianna move and would completely claim that move, I think that kind of unlike Nina, people are onto it in a way that is a little concerning for me this early on. So that's just a little bit of a red flag for me.
What about Sandra? She's managed to lay low in the first few episodes, which you think would be almost impossible for someone of her stature. How she managed to do that, George? And is this obviously a strategy that she's come out with from the get-go?
Sandra's biggest hurdle in this game was the start of the game. The longer she's in it, the more threatening she becomes. And what has impressed me about Sandra is she has not sat out a challenge once. We've had those moments at reward and immunity. We need 2 players from Blood to sit out. She's not putting a hand up this time. She's done her homework about Australians, and she knows that nobody likes quitters on Australian Survivor. And the highlight for Sandra for me was that giant smirk on her face when David was digging his own grave at Tribal Council. Sandra knows what matters on Survivor. You do have to hide in the shadows sometimes, and she's done it very well after episode 3.
Yeah, Sandra is the polar opposite of paranoia. She has nerves of steel. She knows that if she enters the game and just lays low at the start, someone else is going to blow up their game. And that's exactly what we saw. She does such a good job at it. Even when she gets asked at Tribal Council, oh, so do you think you might be a threat? She's like, it's possible. Like, of course it's possible. Of course she's a threat. But she never lets you see that she's worried. She's so calm, and it is a huge strength of her game.
I also think she's spoken to the power of the relationships that she can create. And what was the most important thing for her was her bond with Ben, who gave her the information that her name was out there and then rallied the troops for her in ways that, weren't going so well at first, but she still has those connections to go to bat for her and to maybe if there's momentum against David to really kind of sink in with that and to protect her more. So the fact that she could vocalize that Ben would do her dirty work and it was true that that was happening, it just takes key connections like that to take her further in the game, and she already has them. And yes, the longer you leave her in, the more powerful she will become.
Yeah, personally, I'm pretty excited to see she's managed to dodge some early bullets and stick around. Someone who didn't know was, of course, Andy. He's our first eliminated contestant, and Hayley caught up with them.
I am joined by two-time Australian Survivor player, super fan of the game, Andy Meldrum. Andy, thanks for being here today.
Hayley, it's a pleasure. And can I just say, from one superfan to another, if we're going to talk about someone's season, can we just talk about yours? Because, oh my gosh, I have never enjoyed watching a season as much, certainly of Australian Survivor.
Oh, that is so nice. Thank you. I think we both know a lot of luck is involved, so I got that. So thank you
I've got to get better at the luck bit. I've got to work on that.
It's a big part of it. It sucks. So Andy, what was your goal coming back into Australian Survivor for a second time? Obviously winning, but in addition to that, what did you want to achieve?
So winning actually wasn't even a consideration, to be honest. I knew that probably, well, certainly my best chance and maybe my only chance of winning Survivor would be the first time I played. And part of that is because I was going in as a fan, but nobody knew I was a fan. So I was able to sort of, keep certain things to myself. When the call came along for Blood versus Water, the calculus was not, oh, hey, maybe here's my chance to win. It was almost 100%. Here's my opportunity to give a priceless gift to my sister, who has devoted the last 13 years of her life to raising 3 incredible kids, who simply never would have had the time or the opportunity to apply for the show herself. And here was a chance for me to just kind of give that to her as a gift. So 100% of my motivation was giving her that opportunity. And it's just a joy watching her out there and just the look on her face.
That is so cool. And knowing as well that you are both super fans of the game, it must have been such a special treat for her to
actually just be able to reflect on Sandra Diaz-Twine getting out of a helicopter, arriving at a challenge and sort of looking across, are you okay? Those are memories that are just going to last a lifetime.
And do you think that you would have stayed in the game longer if you had been on the same tribe as Kate at the very start?
So maybe. And here's why. Kate obviously knows me very well, better than anyone else on Earth. And so one of the things she knows about me is that I have mild Asperger's. So what's sort of referred to now as autism spectrum disorder. And so that sort of poses some interesting challenges in the game of Survivor. In particular with sort of group environments of strangers, that's sort of it's kind of a tough environment for me, because it's hard for me to quickly form social connections with a lot of people, and particularly with a lot of strangers. And one of the ways people read that is, someone's shifty or not genuine or maybe aloof, but those are the sort of things you sort of get. So I think if Kate had been on the same tribe as me, one of the things she could have done is sort of, explain to other people, hey, look, Andy's a little bit like this, particularly, sort of when you first meet him, and maybe that would have sort of helped.
So when you did start on the tribe, who did you feel like you were closest to, and what is it that drew you to them?
Yeah, I think I said in the episode, I really, really love this tribe. I love Mark. I think Mark and I have actually sort of quite a bit in common. We're both kind of introverted, and so I definitely saw him as someone I could have worked with, and obviously he voted me out. But KJ I just loved as well. Josh I loved also. Honestly, the hardest thing on that tribe was finding someone to cast a vote for at that first tribal council. I've never experienced this before, I've been in a few different tribe iterations, but there was not a single person that I wanted to cast a vote for on that tribe.
I know we are early days still, but who do you think is going to take out the crown for Sole Survivor?
Well, much as I would love to see Sandra kind of get the first triple crown in Survivor history, I'd be surprised if the Australian players would ever be willing to let her get to the end. So, yeah, if it's not one of Mark or Sam, then I think Josh could be a real chance too, because he's a super smart guy. I think, very socially capable. physically strong too. So yeah, he might be my little dark horse.
Nice. I like that. Andy, thank you so much for chatting to us. It's been a joy to see you on the screen, and we look forward to the rest of the season.
You're super welcome, Hayley. Have a great season on Talking Tribal.
Great chat there, Hayley, talking to an eliminated contestant, something that you've never experienced yourself. So well done. A big week on Australian Survivor to kick things off. But of course, we're back next week, Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. You can catch the next episode of Australian Survivor Blood versus Water on 10 and on 10 Play on demand. And also, if you want to see more of us dissecting, picking apart, pulling apart everything that happens in those episodes, make sure you tune into Australian Survivor Talking Tribal, which will drop straight after the 6th episode. And before we go, we're going to leave you with a little sneak peek of what to expect in episode 4.
Last night, it was my first tribal council in Australia, and it was a hot mess. It was between a shit show and a 3-ring circus. You never go to tribal council and just mess up your game so bad that every single person there wants to vote you out. But Dave did that. And somehow he's still in the game. The damage is done, and he's a loose cannon.
Last night, Dave called me a social butterfly. And what was kind of scary about that is Dave actually categorised my game in exactly the way I'm playing it.
I'm with you.
An incredibly social game that allows me to make strategic moves.
First man in history to blindside himself and then play his own idol.
He's dangerous.
That was insane. He's dangerous.
This feels like a reset in the tribe. So I feel like we're playing the game now.